Welcome to the Halls of Infusion Mythic Plus Guide. Up to date and complete with all the information you need to complete the dungeon and maybe plus 2 it or maybe plus 3 it. It's all here. The routes, the abilities, what you need to dodge, what you need to interrupt. And by the way, all of the other dungeon guides for Mythic Plus are in the description as well. You can go and check them out. We're going to have all of them covered. And this thanks to our lovely Patreons who make these series possible 100%. Now, if you enjoy this and if you like to support the team in this matter, check the link in the description, patreon.com/Marcelian&Online. You'll get plenty of goodies there on top of supporting our content. Things like Patreon podcast, exclusive podcast for the Patreons. We have like WoW wallpapers with your WoW characters over there, depending on the tier you choose to support, bloopers, and all of the good stuff. So if you're interested, check the link in the description. And now let's start it off with Halls of Infusion Mythic Plus Guide. This dungeon has a large amount of trash in its current iteration and several route options depending on what you want to do. We will show you all the cool stuff in here throughout the video, but the route we recommend is pretty straightforward with no invis skips, and it avoids the Swoglet Gauntlet. However, we will present to you in this video all the trash you encounter on any route of the dungeon. The first packs at the start of the dungeon have 4 types of mobs. The Primalist Ravagers cast Tailwind, increasing attack and movement speed of nearby allies. The Rifty Defenders cast an interruptible demoralizing shout, reducing your group's damage done by 25%, so you don't really want that to go through. Their other attacks are Spear Flurry, a frontal attack you can sidestep or outrange as they stop moving when they channel it. Getting hit by this ability will also place a gushing wound on you, dealing physical damage and placing a bleed on their target. The Primalist Geomancers spawn a swirly on the floor, which is followed by a Seismic Slam Leap, so move out of the swirly as per usual. The Containment Apparatus, the toughest mobs in here, does Containment Beam, a channel on a player which deals arcane damage and slows them by 30%. You can CC this attack or Freedom Disengage Shapeshift out of it to cancel the channel. The other attack is Expulse, a cast you really want to interrupt. If it goes through, it will deal large amounts of damage to your entire group. If you run out of ways to stop this for some reason, try to line of sight the cast. Now you can go either left or right to get to the first boss. If you go left, you will encounter the Limited Immortality Device, an engineering one-time use item which will save you a death in the dungeon. However, we prefer to go right as this is also the side which will open the skip if you wipe later on in the dungeon. The skip will allow you to get back to the second and third boss areas now with an added 200% speed buff until you enter combat after dropping down in the water. Going left at the end of this hallway will take you to the second boss area at the Gulping Goliath, and it will be available after clearing his mini-bosses. So if you wipe on Goliath, you'll be able to use the skip already. Going right in the hallway will take you to the third boss, Khajin the Unyielding, but this door will not open until Khajin is dead. The first boss we encounter in the dungeon is Watcher Irideus. He starts the fight with 30% health already, so execute classes, rejoice! His first ability is Titanic Fist. This is a frontal attack directed at the tank which will deal physical damage and stun anyone in front of him. Tanks can sidestep this and everyone else should just not be in front. He also casts Static Charge, channeling energy and dealing party-wide arcane damage for the next 6 seconds. He casts a Spark Volley on all players, spawning swirlies under their feet for the next couple of seconds. Standing in the swirlies will deal arcane damage on hit and place a magic dot which will also take damage for the next 10 seconds. Dodge the goddamn swirlies! His Power Overload ability places a debuff on 3 players inflicting nature damage until it drops or it is dispelled. When this happens, a power field will be dropped at the player's feet, dealing even more damage. We found that the best way to keep the room clear of this is to stack all the debuffs in the same location, away from the middle, and either wait for them to drop off and then quickly get out, or mass dispel and run. These also grow in size in relation to his Siphon power stacks, which he gains during stage 2 of the fight, which we will be discussing in a moment. At 15% health, the boss will cast a Blade of Barrier, gaining 3 stacks of this shield, reducing incoming damage by 99%. While this is up, he will be gathering strength with Siphon Power. This is a stacking ability which will increase his nature damage by 1% per stack, and it will cap at 20 stacks. To remove his barrier and stop his Siphon Power from stacking up, you will need to destroy 3 of the 4 nullification devices spawning during this phase, and you need to destroy them under the boss, where they will cast a nullifying pulse before dying and remove 1 application of the barrier each. The pulse will also inflict arcane damage and silence all players within it for the next 4 seconds, so once the devices start their cast, they stop moving, so you should move out. They also cast Purifying Blast, which you should CC if you can. Otherwise, it will deal damage on a random player and place a stackable dot on them for the next 10 seconds. Healers can also dispel this dot if the damage gets too rough. Once you break the shield, the boss will enter phase 1 again with the empowerment from the Siphon Power stacks, which now increase his damage and the size of the power fields, so be very careful where you place this to not run out of room. After Watcher Irideus dies, you have the option to take 2 different routes again. If you go here through this door, you will start a gauntlet type event and the door forward will be closed until you complete it. If you go left at this door here, there is no special event and you will be able to pull a bit bigger. Choose whatever route you like most depending on your group and trash percentage you need. Both sides have the same types of mobs. Primalist Shock Troopers cast a Lightning Blast, an instant spell which deals nature damage to the tank. Their more important ability, however, is Elemental Focus, an interruptible spell which will give them a buff that turns their Lightning Blast into Infused Lightning, making it jump to additional targets. Luckily, if you miss your interrupt, this buff can also be purged off of them. The Skulking Zealots are stealthy mobs which will stun the first target they see with Cheap Shot. You can use flares and other ground abilities to take them out of stealth and more easily deal with this. They also gain a Rising Squall buff, which will increase their attack speed, and this will stack up with every melee attack they do, so clear them out quickly or CC them until their buff drops. The Dazzling Dragonflies cast Dazzle, a frontal disorient which can also be interrupted or just dodged, so do that. They also buff themselves with Evasive Flutter, increasing their dodge chance. Curious Swoglets fixate and debuff Gulp Swog Toxin on players when they get close. This is a stackable poison which deals insignificant damage to players, but it will instantly kill anyone who reaches 9 stacks of the poison application. The easiest way to deal with this is to keep them CC'd, slowed, or kited. If you have a Poison Dispel class in your group or a Shaman with a Poison Cleansing Totem, they are much easier to deal with. If you happen to also have a Herbalist in your group, they can click these infused mushrooms, which can be found in several areas of the dungeon, giving your entire group a Cleansing Spores buff for the next 30 minutes, which will remove 1 stack of the poison every 15 seconds. It's not much, but it may save a life. In order to open the way to the next boss, you will also need to find a pair of mini-bosses. Flamecolor Amy will cast Pyretic Burst, an interruptible cast which will dot you if it goes through, causing you to take fire damage for the next 6 seconds. They also cast Molten Subduction, a non-interruptible cast which will place a rooting debuff on a player, which can be dispelled, and it is followed by his Magma Crush cast at the same player, dealing damage to anyone standing in the swirl, so move out. Their most important ability, however, is Cauterize, an interruptible 30% heal on himself or his friend Squallbringer Cyraz. Cyraz will cast the Zephyr's Call, a non-interruptible channel which summons Zephyrlings to assist him. They do melee damage. Whirling Fury is another non-interruptible spell which charges to a player and creates a swirly whirlwind, dealing physical damage. So move out of the channel. The second boss is a gigantic frog. You may want to have a mushroom buff by now, and if you haven't found one yet, you can pass the boss, kill a dragon, eat a mushroom, and then go back to the boss with your new buff. This is a pretty straightforward fight where you need to dodge swirlies, kite swoglets, and feed the boss. The boss will cast Overpowering Croak, dealing physical damage to everyone in the group and causing a cave-in, spawning swirlies near players, which will also deal physical damage if you stand in them, and spawn the same curious swoglets you encountered during the trash. These will once again fixate on players and place the Gulp Swog Toxin Poison debuff on them when they get close. The best way we found to deal with this is to stack under the boss before this attack in order to spawn all the adds there for easy control for CC and AoE. The boss will also cast Gulp, eating everything and everyone within 10 yards, including the swoglets. One player, generally the tank, should also stand in this and pop a defensive, as it deals quite a lot of nature damage for the duration he's being eaten. While inside the gullet, the target will also gain 3 stacks of the poison debuff, so pay attention to your stacks and never reach 10. If the Goliath will not find a player to gulp on, he will become hangry, gaining a 50% stackable physical damage buff which lasts for 1 minute. If you feed him a player on his next gulp, however, he will calm down and lose the buff. The boss will also cast Toxic Effluvia, dealing party-wide AoE nature damage for the duration of the channel. Use healing cooldowns and defensives to deal with this. He will also occasionally cast Belly Slam on a player, and you should instantly start moving out of this, as he is a very speedy frog and will squash you if you're too slow. Moving on to the new trash mobs. On the way to the third boss, we have only a few packs of mobs. We have a dragon and 3 types of primalist mobs. The Glacial Proto-Dragon casts Oceanic Breath, a non-interruptible frontal attack you should move out of as soon as possible, unless you're the tank and you should stand still and perhaps pop a defensive. They will also cast Deep Chill, dealing group-wide frost damage and placing a magic dispellable dot on everyone, which will also reduce movement speed by 30% for its duration. Using movement impairment removal abilities like Tiger's Lust, Disengage, Shape Rhythm will also remove this dot off of you. Primal Earthshakers cast Rumbling Earth, an AoE circle around the caster dealing nature damage and stunning everyone standing in it, so move out of this please. Primalist Gale Singers cast Wind Buffet, an interruptible cast which deals nature damage to their target. Their more notable ability is Thunderstorm, an instant cast on a player summoning a thunderstorm on them dealing damage while within it, so quickly move out. Primalist Ice Colors cast Refreshing Tides, an interruptible cast on one of their allies, healing them for a large portion of their health, so make sure you keep this one interrupted. They also cast Ice Shard, dealing large amounts of frost damage to its target. Khajin the Unyielding is a healing-intensive fight, especially in tyrannical keys, so you may want to save Bloodlust for this. Throughout the fight, your party will have a Polar Winds debuff, constantly taking frost damage. She will also occasionally cast Frost Shock on the tank, an instant 5-second 50% slow which can also be removed with Dispels or Freedom. Around her room you may notice a couple of ice boulders, some intact ones which also have a beam of light radiating up, and some cracked ones. Always keep an eye on the location of a nearby intact boulder, as you will need it later on. When she casts her Frost Cyclone at a random player, she will conjure a tornado which will charge towards that player, and if it encounters an ice boulder on its way, it will either crack the intact ones or destroy the cracked ones. The destruction of the cracked boulders by any ability during this fight will cause an avalanche, exploding the boulder and dealing large amounts of damage to anyone within 12 yards of it. So be very careful to not be near this when they blow up. Also, make sure to bait the cyclones in a safe area before the cast starts, away from any intact ice boulders, or you can use it to destroy the cracked ones if they are too close to an intact one you plan on using later. Hailstorm is a 7-second cast which culminates in a lethal AoE explosion you need to hide from or immune. The best way to deal with this is to hide behind one of the intact ice boulders you have available in the room. Make sure the boulder you hide behind is not too close to a cracked one, as the hailstorm will cause these to explode. The intact ones will also now become cracked, but more will spawn when she casts her next ability, Glacial Surge. This will place rings of frost at her feet, radiating outwards, dealing large amounts of damage to anyone standing in them, and spawning more ice boulders for you to hide behind. Rinse and repeat. The last area of the dungeon is a long bridge leading you to the last boss. You'll have to dodge the crashing tsunamis coming down the road, dealing damage and pushing you back. There are some nice spots where you can light of sight these, like the pillars in the middle, generally used by the tanks and the melees, and the side pillars generally used by the ranged players. If you prefer dodging, make sure you position yourself around the middle area and sidestep the waves past these line drawings on the floor. The tank also needs to be mindful of the trash positioning for the melees, as the dragon will once again cast frontals which they will need to dodge, while dodging the waves as well, so leave the safe LOS areas to the melees, while you stay a bit further, turning the dragon away from them. The entire bridge is a gauntlet, so the tsunamis and the aqua ragers will continuously spawn until you defeat the mini-boss at the end of the road. Aqua Ragers cast Boiling Rage, an interruptible enrage which increases their physical damage done by 50% for 15 seconds. You can also soothe or trank shot this. Tidal Divergence is their other cast, and a very long one at that, which they cast when they are on low health. You need to interrupt this as well, unless you want little Aqua Links to spawn from the Exploding Rangers at the end of their cast. Deal with the dragons the same as before, but now with the added difficulty of dodging them waves. Infuser Saria is a mini-boss who casts Inundate, a non-interruptible party-wide damage ability which throws water balls at players, dealing a lot of damage when they reach them. This can however be line-of-sighted, so if the damage is too high in your party, you can just hide behind the pillars. Aqueous Barrier is an interruptible shield that casts on herself. If it goes through, you can also purge it off of her, as it is a magic buff. Her last ability is Flash Flood, a non-interruptible swirly she places under herself which deals a lot of damage and knocks you back. If you happen to fall off the bridge at any point, including from this ability, you will be taken back to the start of the bridge. The last boss here is a badass water elemental who's gonna try to kill you with all sorts of watery abilities. In stage 1, he will cast Tempest's Fury, dealing AoE damage to your party, so have some defensives or healing cooldowns ready for this. The boss will also cast Infuse Globules, summoning swirlies around the room which will soon become watery orbs slowly moving around. Dodge the swirlies and later the orbs as they deal a lot of damage and also trigger Waterlogged, slowing the baddies who stood in it. Lucky for you, this is a magic debuff, so it is dispellable. His Squall Buffet is a tank buster which also knocks the tank out of melee. Use a defensive for this and get back in melee as quick as possible, otherwise the boss might nuke down one of your melees. Focus Deluge is a follow-up effect on the Squall Buffet, and it will channel frost damage into the tank for the next 5 seconds. If there are no players or pets in melee at any point during this phase, the boss will periodically deal frost damage to all players with Undertow. Upon reaching 100 energy, the boss will enter phase 2 and cast away all your party members to the ends of the bridges in the area, while he will submerge, becoming unattackable. In this phase, you will need to dodge the infused globules and the crashing tsunamis in order to get back to the boss. Sometimes you have a friend with you on the bridge, and if one of you arrives at the main area faster, this will clear the bridge you came from so your slow friend can also join you. In the main area of the fight, you will find 4 Primalist Infusers who will channel Infuse into the submerged boss, trying to empower him with a 1% damage buff per stack. The longer they cast, the more stacks the boss will have when phase 1 starts again. You will need to interrupt this as soon as possible, but only if you have a CC available to deal with their Inundate cast, which will deal a lot of AoE damage. We recommend CCing the channeling infusers with traps, blinds, paralysis, etc., or grip them all together and nuke them down quickly while AoE stunning, typhooning, roaring this attack away. Once all infusers are down, the boss will re-emerge and phase 1 will start again with the added difficulty of the infused buff. And that's it! Now you know! Halls of Infusion will not be a challenge anymore. If you made it this far, congratulations, and let me know if this was of any help in the comments. As always, we want to thank the Patreons for making these Mythic Plus Guides possible. Remember, you can check patreon.com/Marcelian online, the link in the description, and see what this whole Patreon thing is all about. Thank you for watching the video. See you in the next guide on next Monday. Alright, bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.